In this video, I'm going to introduce you to the ever-popular joystick and slider workflow that's actually native inside of Cinema 4D. Let's go ahead and check it out. Unless you've been hiding under a rock, you've probably heard of the After Effects plugin by the very talented Mike Overbeck called Joysticks and Sliders that allows you to interpolate between different poses to create complex animations very easily. Now you see this being used a ton to easily rig up character, face, and mouth animations inside of 2D. And it's actually based on and originated from the concept of using joysticks and slider controls for facial animation inside of 3D. And that's what we're going to be covering today, showing you how to build that joystick and slider workflow inside of Cinema 4D. Go ahead and be sure to download the free project file so you can follow along. You can find that download link in the video description. Character we're going to be animating, and we're going to animate the eyebrows here and the mouth, which is actually part of a mesh here, if you can see. And basically what we're going to do is use something called a pose morph tag, or blend shapes, which is what it's also called in other 3D apps, to kind of control and store poses of our geometry. So like positions, or you can see my eyebrows are made up of splines. So even like spline distortion, mesh distortion, if you move polygons or points on a mesh like the face here. What a pose morph does is stores all that stuff and allows you to blend between different poses or deformation states, which is really, really cool. So enough talking about it, let me just go ahead and show you really quick what the pose morph tag does. So what I'm going to do is I got my eyebrow group here. And what I'll do is I know I want to morph both of these eyebrows. Okay, I want to move them up and maybe adjust the splines here to kind of maybe have them arch a little bit more. So two things I want to record: the position and then also the points on the spline. So what I'm going to do is on this eyebrow null, I'm going to right click, go to rigging tags, and go to pose morph. Now what pose morph allows you to do is store a bunch of these different options here. So position, scale, rotation, points, UVs, parameters. So think of parameters like bend, deformer, strength, like that strength parameter is a parameter. It would store that. User data, which is like custom user data, and hierarchy, which is very important for us, specifically because we have two splines that are going to drive our eyebrow geometry, which is basically just capsules that are being deformed by a spline wrap and being deformed by these splines. So basically all we need to do is really just move these spline points around and move the position and stuff, and we should get a really nice eyebrow animation. So we get to check on all the things we want to store. Now, we know we want to adjust points. We know we want to move position. We could move scale. One of the rules of thumb is I always check on way more than I really need here. And the thing is that it's way easier to uncheck some of these options than to go back and check them back on, because it can totally screw everything up. So I always like to, go a little overkill. So I know I'm going to store position, so I'm going to check that on. And one of the annoying little things is that the moment you check on one of those little mixing options, it's going to dump you into the tag tab. So all you need to do is go back into your basic tab and you can go and continue checking on some of these options. So even though I don't think I'm going to use it, I'm just going to check on scale. Same thing with rotation. I know I'm definitely going to need to store points because I'll be moving the points on this spline around. The really cool thing is you can actually animate between two different spline deformations, which is really cool. So you can animate splines using pose morph, which is really cool. No parameters, no user data. I am going to need to check on this hierarchy. And this is very important because you see I have the pose morph tag applied to my eyebrow null. If I did not have this hierarchy checked on, the pose morph tag is going to look at only this object that it's applied to for any kind of changes or deformation in position, scale, rotation, any of these options we have checked here. But with the hierarchy on, it's actually going to look at not only the object it's applied to, but any other children underneath in the hierarchy underneath this parent null. Okay, so that means both these eyebrows, and if we even change anything with the cylinders or anything like that. So all of these are parameters. So if we did want to change like the radius or height or anything like that, we would need to go back into the basic tab and make sure we turn on the parameters option here. If we did not check on the parameters, it would not store any of the parameter items here, like radius, height, segments, anything like that. Okay. So now we can go back And I think we're all good here. Once we're done checking on all of the items we want to mix together, we are going to go into the tag tab. And you're going to see we have a base pose, which is just your pose that we started out with, and then a new pose by default that we can then morph into. Okay, so it's very aptly named. We're just pose morphing into poses. And you can see that we're currently in our edit mode. Okay, so this is where we can select any of our poses here and change anything. Okay, so points on our eyebrow here, any of that kind of stuff. And then once we're done, we can go into the animate mode and see what that morph looks like. Okay, so I'm in edit mode. We can double click on this initial pose that we have here. And let's just name this left eyebrow up. Okay, and then what we can do on this pose with this pose selected, we can go to our left eyebrow and we can go into our move tool here. So maybe what we'll do is hold the shift key down and move this up maybe 35 centimeters. And that's important because I want to match the right eyebrow here. And then I'm going to go into my point mode here and maybe go to let's go into my front view here. And there's my spline. And I can actually move these points, change the Bezier handles here. And the cool thing about this is because we have that spline points, the points option activated on our pose morph, boop, right there, it's actually going to store all of these edits we're making to the points on the spline, which is super, super cool. Again, pose morphs are really great for just, animating between different spline deformations. So that's looking good. So we have that. Let's go back into our perspective view here. And let's go into our tag and let's go to animate. And now you'll see there's our left eyebrow up and the strength of this pose is 100%. Now, if we bring this down to 0, you can see we're actually back to our base pose, the pose that we started out with, okay? So you can see that we can then go ahead and click this little keyframe dot here and animate this going up or down. So we'll go back to edit. And so we just animated or, stored a morph pose of our left eyebrow. So let's go ahead and add a second pose, and I'll double click to rename this right eyebrow up. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing with our right eyebrow spline. So I'm going to go into my move tool, and again I'm going to hold the shift key down to move this up to 35 centimeters. And you can see there we have, that's why I wanted to make sure that we're moving these up the same amount in centimeters on the Y. So now we can go ahead and let's also go into point mode on this right eyebrow, go to our front view, and let's go ahead and change the arc, make this a little more of a arcing eyebrow, and just adjust these Bezier handles, adjusting the points on the spline. Looking good. And again, you probably want to be more exact than I am right now, but I'm not going to tweak these points forever. And there we go. So now with this eyebrow up, we don't even have to go into animate mode. We can actually just adjust this strength right here to see what that pose, that right eyebrow up, when we remove the strength, we're again going back to that base pose. And if I click on the left eyebrow up, you can see that's that full pose. So you can see that our mode's set to selected. So whatever pose we select, that's what we're going to see in our little edit mode. So right eyebrow up, you're not seeing anything. That's because the strength is at 0%. Okay, so I can click on my left eyebrow up. That's our left eyebrow pose that we stored in this pose. And that's my right eyebrow up that is stored in this pose. You can see back and forth. Hey, how's it going? So a lot of fun stuff we can do. Now we can go into animate mode. And again, there's our eyebrows here. Now, these are your sliders, okay? Joystick and sliders, these are your sliders. You want a HUD interface for that? Just click on any of these little poses and just drag and drop them into your viewport. Boom, there's your sliders. Now, what you're gonna wanna do is if I deselect that pose morph, you're gonna see that those little UI elements go away. So if you right click on any of these little UI elements, you can actually go and say, you know what, show always. So even when I'm not selecting the pose morph tag, always show this UI element. I'll do the same thing for the pose morph right eyebrow. So always. And now you can see you can keyframe right here and adjust these little sliders. So there's your sliders right there. So we're halfway done. Again, using the power of pose morphs, which are really cool. But you might be thinking, what if I want to go above 100%? You can see that we can actually go over 100% and below 0% to get some really accentuated pose morphs. It's basically just like adding on to the point deformations and just kind of continuing them out. Okay, they're not clamped, which is really cool. The one thing with these sliders here in the UI is that they are clamped. We can't go below 0%. We can't go above 100. But if we actually click this little twirl down button here and then click and drag, you can see that we're unclamped. We can actually go above 100% and below 0%. So we can maybe bring this eyebrow down a little bit, or, do whatever kind of poses we want. We have a lot more flexibility. If you want to get back to your default state, just right click, reset to default, right click, reset to default, and there's both of our poses at 0, or you can just go ahead and just hit this reset sliders, okay? So really cool stuff, but you might be wondering, okay, well, what if I want to control both of these eyebrows at once? Maybe I want both of the eyebrows to go up at the same time and go down at the same time. So I want like one slider control that's controlling both of them. Well, that's actually fairly easy. If I go, and you can see that if I bring both of these strengths up, and I just select one or the other, one goes down because I'm only seeing the deformation or the pose morph of one of the eyebrows. But if I go and change this edit mode to just selected, I can actually say, you know what, I want to see this in place, which means that both my left eyebrow up and right eyebrow down are at 100%. So I'm actually seeing that in the edit mode. So it's not just seeing what's selected, you're seeing everything all added up at once. Okay, so you're seeing all the poses, both left and right eyebrow up. And what if we wanted to say, you know what, store this as a pose, and then we can actually have both of our eyebrows working at once. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and hold the shift key down and then click this add pose. And what that's going to do is going to create this brand new pose. And if you select this, you can see that it's actually controlling both of those little morphs there. So if I change the edit mode from in place to selected, now you can again see like, okay, I'm left eyebrow, that pose is selected and I'm only seeing that. Right eyebrow up, I'm only seeing that. Pose 0, that's actually both of our eyebrows up at once. So basically just holding that shift modifier key and adding that add pose actually stores that current morph that you're seeing with that edit mode set to in place, and you store that as a new pose. So this, if we double click here, this is both eyebrows up, okay? And then we can go into animate mode. There's our both eyebrows up. I can drag and drop that into our UI, close that, and right click, show always, and then we can animate both of these. So this is really cool because we can animate both of these individual individual eyebrows, and then have both of the eyebrows go up and down with that overall both eyebrow control. So a lot of flexibility here, building all these sliders, and basically we're just building these pose morph poses, and then just going into animate mode and drag and dropping them into our UI for easy access and easy keyframing. Again, we're just clicking on that little dot and filling it in, and there's our keyframed pose. Okay, so we can just keyframe that, and we got that little, the rock eyebrow going on, which I always like to flash the rock eyebrow every now and then. So that is your sliders, okay, and those are our eyebrows. Now, what if we wanted to add some animation and morphing to the mouth to have, whatever kind of mouth movement that we want? Well, that's where a joystick will come in handy. All right, so let's go on our head mesh here. So this is the mesh that has the mouth connected to it. Okay, then the mouth and the head and the ears, little ears going on there. And basically what we're going to want to do is I only want to affect the mesh and basically the points and polygons on this mesh. So I'm going to right click on the head, go to rigging tags and pose morph. And there's our good friend, the pose morph again. We've already been introduced to this little guy. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and figure out, okay, well, what do we want to store here? And I just said that, if we go into point mode, we can move these points around the mouth and make it open and, do whatever we want with a little bit of, point manipulation and polygon movement on the face. So basically what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to kind of go overkill. I'm going to check on points. Again, it's going to dump me into this tag tab. Let's go back to our basic tab and then just check on position scale, because I might, actually scale some of these points and want them to store there. Rotation, we can do that too. But everything else, we don't need hierarchy, because the only thing we need to edit is this object that this pose morph tag is applied to, which is the head. Okay. So we're done here. Let's go to our tag tab and let's go ahead and let's create our first morph pose. So let's go into our tag tab and create the first pose that we want to morph into, which could be, let me just double click this and just have this be mouth open. Okay. And then what I can do is really get in here, zoom in, go into point mode and just start selecting points and just moving them around. Okay. So I can select both these points. Whoops. Select both these points, move them down, get this point, move that down. And you can see that this is a little difficult to, be selecting points here. And, I have to use my 4-up view, and you're really not sure which parts of the mouth that you are selecting. So one of the things I like to do is there's, this mesh, we're dealing with an inside of the mouth and we can't really get to all the points predictively. Hey, there's one of the pieces that I want. So what I like to do is kind of adjust this so I'm only seeing the polygons that I want to actually be, manipulating. So what I'm going to do is go into my polygon mode, and I'm going to grab my loop selection tool by going to U and then L for loop selection, and selecting this little loop selection of the inner points there. And then I can grow this loop selection to loop to or grow to the surrounding polygons by going to U and then Y for grow selection. And you'll see there I got the inner loop and then this new outer loop of the mouth. And I actually don't need this outer loop. So I'm going to hold the command key down and just click off that outer ring. And then what I can do with the mouth and then two inner loop selections of the mouth selected, I can go to select and just go to hide unselected. So this is going to hide all the polygons that I don't currently have selected now. So this allows me to now look inside the mouth and really get all of these points that I'm looking for without having to, dig through any of the little points and stuff. So there's way less points I have to worry about. Okay. So we can go ahead and move those points up. Let's grab my rectangular selection by hitting 0 and select this point and move those down. So now we're opening the mouth here. And now this is so much easier to predictively select these points and maybe have these 2 points go up. And, I'm not going to tweak this forever, but basically you can see that I'm just, adjusting the points on the mouth to make it look like the mouth is open. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what this looks like with all the other polygons added back again. Okay, so let me just open that just a little bit more. Boom. And then what we can do is go back into polygon mode, because that's the mode that we actually did that hide selection with. So if I go to my polygon mode, go to select, and then go to unhide all, boom, we just got back all of our polygons here. And, maybe we adjust a few more things, do whatever we want to do. And I would say that this is looking pretty good for what we need. Okay, so there's your mouth open. We just adjusted all those points. So let's go back to our pose morph here for the head. And there's our mouth open. Wah, wah, wah. You can see that pose morph stored all those point movements that I just had. Okay, so we can go to animate and adjust this. Now we don't want a slider for this. We actually want to be able to morph into different types of, phonetic mouth shapes. So we have like this kind of phonetic shape for the mouth for an sound. We can also go back into edit mode at any time and adjust this pose if we wanted to tweak it. So we got this mouth open pose. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stick with this pose and just basically change this pose into like an ooh kind of mouth, okay? So what I'm gonna do is right click on the mouth open pose, and you can see we have all these different options here. And what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and copy and paste this. So what that's gonna do is just paste that pose or duplicate it. And now I can go ahead and let's name this ooh up. So it's gonna be like an ooh kind of shape of the mouth, like O shape of the mouth, but it's just gonna be positioned upward. So now I can go, again, I think, these points are spread out enough. The only thing I need to worry about is when I'm doing these rectangular selections, I'm not selecting, the back of the head here, okay? So I'm gonna have the 4-up view going. You can see I just selected some points back here, so I'm gonna hold the Command key down and just click and drag to deselect those points. And actually a better way to do this is just grabbing that loop selection that we had. So UL, and I'll grab this outer loop and then this inner loop of polygons, and I can scale this and kind of just scale this down and move this. And then that kind of makes a little O shape for the mouth. Whoops. And this is just a way easier way to do this. So UL for loop selection and holding the shift key down to add to that selection. And we'll position this up a little bit. And again, I can always adjust these points here. Make sure you're looking at this from all sides so it doesn't look weird. And just kind of move these points around. And you want some good polygon flows as well. So make sure that everything's looking good there. Liking it. Move these up, scale, move this down. And I would say that's a pretty good O mouth, okay? So he's like whistling or saying, oh no, EJ, you're terrible at modeling. So there's our O, okay? And then let's do O down. So like an ooh kind of sound. So we're just gonna go ahead and right click, copy, right click, paste. And there we can rename this like ooh down. So like down, ooh. And go and reselect all these points, UL to get the loop selection on the inside and then the outside, and just hit the T key for scale and just move these points down. And we can adjust this, adjust these points out here. And we got a little bit something like that. Nothing too crazy. Maybe make the mouth a little thinner. And now let's see what this looks like in compared to the ooh up. There's the down. You can see what that looks like. And then the mouth open. And the mouth closed. That's our base pose, okay? So one last thing, let's go ahead and just make like an E, like if you were gonna say E, like that E sound, we need like a thinner kind of smile. So for that, we're just gonna go ahead and right click that mouth open, go copy, and then right click and go to paste. So there's our mouth open duplicated. And this will be like a thin smile, okay? So for this, I already got the loop selections going. I can just scale this down and voila. I mean, that's basically it. Just scale down these points, maybe move some of these points around, just holding the shift key to add to selection. And just, tweak this a little bit. Grab these bottom points here. So basically you want like the mouth shape that would be like an E, okay? We're saying EJ. How would your mouth distort to say E? Something like that. So that's looking like E. I always like to, it's good to like look in a mirror or something too to see like how your mouth distorts. It's also really good mouth morph shapes or mouth shapes for cartoon mouths and stuff online that you could always reference as well if you really want to get nitty gritty in it. But I would say that's looking like a good E kind of mouth shape. Okay, so we got base pose with the mouth closed. So this is just mouth closed. We can even rename our base pose, not clowns, closed. There we go. Mouth closed, open, oo, thin smile, e. Okay, so oo, e. So we got, enough mouth shapes that we can make this little person talk. Okay, so those are all the kind of things that I'm going to have now. And I don't know why I had that lock on. I'm just going to make sure that that's not on. Don't need to lock that. But I'm just going to go into animate mode now. And whoa, got a little cleft palette going on there. But basically what this is just all of these poses mixed together on top of one another. So what we can do is just, this is really terrifying to look at. So I'm just going to hit reset sliders, and that'll bring all of our morph strengths down back to 0. So we're seeing our base pose. And now what we need to do is build our joystick interface so we can go ahead and like morph and use the joystick to morph between all of those mouth shapes to then, make our guy talk. So what we're going to do to create our joystick UI is to create custom user data. You notice if you select anything in your hierarchy here, you see this little user data option. And basically what add user data allows you to do is kind of like your own custom, slider expressions and effects that you could build, like custom effects in After Effects. Kind of similar thing here. So we're just going to go and just add user data. And I'm just going to have it added to our head group null. It's important where you put it. Okay. I'm just going to have it there so you always know like where to go to get to those settings. And there's already a data option here. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And I'm just going to add group and drag and drop this out from underneath that user data default little group, and just rename this mouth control, or mouth control. And then I'm just going to add some data to that. And if you twirl down that mouth control, there's our data. And we can rename this to mouth joystick. Okay. And what you can now do is we need to choose the right type of data that's going to give us that joystick kind of interface, that little block with the little diamond inside that we can, use as a joystick. So the data type that we're going to need for that is a vector. Okay. Data type vector. For the interface, you can see this is the default vector, but what we're going to want to choose is 2D vector field for the interface. And you can see here is our little joystick interface. Okay, so it's just called a 2D vector field. And then for the unit, we can just choose percentage because that's basically what we're dealing with our pose morph. It's dealing with percentages of pose morph strength. Okay, so what we can do now is we want to set the default value of our joystick to be right in the middle. And that's just going to be 50 and 50 here. So that's just going to be the default state of our joystick, of course. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. And you're going to see that on this head group null, there's my new tab, my custom user data, and there is my mouth joystick. And those values are changing. Now, if I want to get this back to its default, I can just right click and go to reset to default. But you can see that, okay, we have the joystick interface, but how do we get this connected to driving that pose morph? Okay, let me just reset this again. So how we can do that is by using something called a driver tag. Okay, and you're going to want to apply it to the object that you have your user data applied to. So in our case, this head group null, there's the mouth control. I'm going to right click on that head group and I'm going to go to rigging tags, driver. Okay, and this gives you like a little, the resolution of what that little vector field will look like. Like how many poses do you want to store in whatever direction your joystick will go? Okay, so in the upper left, what's that pose? In the downward direction of that joystick, what's that pose that it's going to, morph into? So you can see that we don't have a current driving parameter. There's nothing driving this driver tag, no one at the wheel. So what we're going to do is just say, you know what, we want that mouth joystick user data that we just made, the 2D vector field, we want that to be the driving parameter. And what do we want to drive? We want to drive our mouth pose morph. Okay, so right there, and actually, we should probably rename these pose morphs to eyebrow and mouth, just because if you have multiple pose morphs, you want to keep everything straight. So mouth pose morph. Okay, and you can see that as I click on these little dots, and you can see that the resolution is set by these numbers here. So basically, how many points in your grid do you want? So resolution of 1 and 3. So if you just wanted like mouth closed and mouth open, or like a O face up here, closed mouth and open mouth, you can do that and just move the joystick up and down. But we want to have a full range of joystick motions where you can move the joystick all around and get different types of poses. Okay, so right now, this middle portion, this middle dot, where our joysticks at the direct center is going to be, are just default pose. So it's set to off. If I click it and hold, you can see there's all of our different poses that we can morph into that we have set in that pose morph. Okay, so the middle is going to be off. Let's click this up dot, and we can change the parameter for that up position of the joystick to that ooh up, okay? And then for the down position, let's have this be the mouth wide open, okay? And then for the right position of our joystick, let's have this be the thin smile. And then for the left point, let's have this be the ooh down. Downwards. And what you're going to see now is if I go into my pose morph tag, make sure that the animate mode is set. It's not in edit mode, but it's in animate mode. I can go to my mouth control. Let's actually just drag and drop this mouth joystick user interface into our HUD here, and boom, check that out. We're controlling, there's our joystick. We are controlling the mouth movements here. With this driver tag, this 2D vector field, which is our joystick, and we can move this around. Now you're going to notice if I go to the corners though, it's just going to default back to that off state. Now what if I actually wanted to have this be, if it went to the corner, I actually wanted this to be a blend of our top position and our side position. So what can we do to do that? So what I'm going to do is go to my driver tag, and in these corners, you're going to see these corner points. You're going to see that the parameter is set to off. So that's that default pose with the mouth closed. But what I can say is actually just check on this mix option in all of the corners. And what this will do, and see that the mouth moved a little bit there, is it's actually going to mix between the two closest points that's near it. So if it's in this corner, it's going to be a mix of the thin smile and the mouth open in this bottom corner here. And you can see that that is the case. So there's the thin smile. And as I move down, it's going to go to the mouth open. So it's going to be a combination between that thin smile, mouth open. If I go into this corner, it's going to be a combination of the down and the mouth open. So we're getting this really weird like overextension of the mouth. And in the upper right, we're getting some really weird distortion, but that's a mix of the ooh down and the ooh up, okay? So we can get all types, we get way more mouth shapes when we set these corners to mix. And now we got something looking pretty good. So we can keyframe this to, make this guy talk, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go, and I can right click here and go to reset to default. Now I'll make the joystick go back to the center position. I'll just set a keyframe right there. And then let's make this guy say keyframe. So key, E sound. So like that. Okay. And we'll set a keyframe. So key, and then maybe we'll move this down a little bit. So key, and then we'll have f for frame. So f, like maybe a mouth shape like that. So key, f. So the is over here. So key, f, frame. So that's that kind of mouth kind of shape. So key frame. So the mouth would be open. So frame, key frame, and then the mouth would be closed. And the nice part about the mouth closed is we can mix this to whatever we want. So keyframe, or I can just right click, go to reset the default for fully closed mouth. Just set a keyframe there. Free keyframe. Kind of like that. But you can definitely fine tune that a lot better than I just did. But hopefully that gives you a good idea of how you can use joysticks and sliders, which is basically, came from 3D, use this kind of workflow in Cinema 4D to animate your characters and stuff like that. Now you can use this even for if you wanted to rotate the head or bend the head or anything like that. But I mean, that's kind of the benefit of building a character in 3D. You don't need to set up a slider for this head tilt or anything like that because it's simply rotation keyframe. So you don't even really need to set that up, which is pretty nice, right? So again, we can go ahead and we got our sliders for our, you can see how everything's starting to overlap here. I'm not sure what's going on. Let's right click and remove this. And then let's say we wanted to move these things around. What I'm going to do is hold the control key down and I can move these. You can see if I click and drag, it's not going to work. But if I hold the control key down, I can move this wherever I want. Move any of these sliders where I want, anywhere in the interface here. So whatever I want to do here. And then again, if I uncheck that head group null, that's joystick's going to go away. So I'm going to right click show always. So that'll always be in my viewport and I can keyframe this however I want. All right, so here I have my animated head with the mouth being driven by just animating that joystick and then having the eyebrows moving, animating those sliders for those eyebrows. Now, one of the best things about this whole workflow is at any time, I could go ahead and edit any of these poses, okay? So let's just say, you know, maybe for the E part of our mouth movement, right about there, I'm not really digging like the E. Maybe I want to go in and adjust that mouth pose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I want to adjust that thin smile. Now, I'm not going to be able to select the points and adjust anything because that driver tag is going to lock me out of making any kind of point changes or anything like that. So what I need to do first is go to the basic tab of my driver tag and deselect this enable, okay? And what this allows me to do is go into my pose morph tag on my head and I'm still in edit mode. And now I have these points selected. Now, what I can do is just zoom in here and, you know, I could just scale these points, or if I wanted to, you know, fine tune and adjust these points, I could, you know, go and select individual points, but you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave these points selected. I'm going to show you a different way we can edit the mouth, because one of the big pains in the butt is you want to have, you know, the point on this side of the mouth also move the same as this side of the mouth. You want it to be symmetrical, all the edits that you make. And so instead of selecting these points, we can actually use a different tool. And that tool is going to be in our mesh menu. And we're going to use a sculpting brush. And we're just going to grab our grab tool. And this is going to allow us to grab points. Now, the great thing about any of these sculpting brushes is that we have the ability to adjust the size, of course, but in the symmetry tab, we can actually check on if we want to have this symmetrical edit. So I'm just going to check on this X parentheses YZ. You can see there's this dot on this side. There's also a corresponding dot on the other side. So if I move any of these dots, you can see that I'm symmetrically also editing the points on the other side. So this is really great when I'm adjusting, say, the mouth. Okay, so maybe we can have like the E. Let's zoom out to see what this is actually going to look like. So the E looks a little bit more like this. Okay, so I think that's looking good. We just edited that pose. Again, we made sure we selected the pose we want to edit. And now we can go back into animate mode and that should all update. Now, again, we need to have that driver tag back on. So we're going to go to our driver tag, go to the basic tab, and just check on enable. And now if we move this joystick to the right with that updated thin smile pose and looking really nice. So joysticks and sliders, my friends. Hopefully this kind of opens your eyes to the possibilities inside of Cinema 4D and using this familiar workflow that a lot of people got introduced to in After Effects and using it where that inspiration first derived from inside of 3D. Well, I hope that this tutorial kind of opened your eyes and made you raise your eyebrows a little bit at the possibilities of using the pose morph tag and the joysticks and slider workflow that's actually native inside of Cinema 4D, as you know, that's where that whole workflow kind of started in the world of 3D. So highly recommend you play around with this workflow. It's not just for character animation. You have a lot of very MoGraph-y kinds of use cases that you can discover that can totally change the way that you animate inside of Cinema 4D. Now, if you want to keep up to date on all the latest happenings, not only in MoGraph, but 3D as well, be sure to subscribe and definitely check out our courses page to see what kind of courses you can take to take your career to the next level. Well, that's it for me. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.